Triad, which is 8, 9, and 1. And those are the ones in green. And little housekeeping note, I'm working off an outline here on the other side of my screen. So if you see my eyes bing bonging around, that's why. But we're going to start off talking about the gut triad, which is pretty typical for Enneagram teaching to start with that triad because it contains the number 9. And we usually start with the number 9 because, like I said in my last video, it is kind of the rainbow of the Enneagram. It's the type that incorporates all the other types, and you'll see why. But quick note about this triad, this is called the gut triad because all of the energy that comes from these patterns, the way that these patterns make decisions, is often with a gut feeling. A lot of times you'll hear folks who embody 8, 9, and 1 patterning say things like, I just knew it in my gut, or I just had a feeling. And they're often folks that have good contact with their instincts. So we're going to talk more about each of those types and kind of how that shows up. Another important thing about the gut triad to note is that the core emotion of the gut triad is anger. That means that each of these types has a particular relationship with anger. For type 8, they are doing what's called externalizing anger, meaning that they're feeling a lot of anger and they're pushing it outward. In fact, of all of these types, we can really see the anger the most in type 8. For type 9, they are avoiding or numbing anger, meaning that they're basically trying to act like anger doesn't exist. 9s often think of it as a bad thing. And then we've got type 1 that is internalizing anger. So they're feeling a lot of anger, which type 1s often call annoyance, or they find things irritating, but it's really anger. But they're trying really hard to keep it all inside. Okay, so those are the 3 things about the gut triad that are really important to notice. And then I'm going to start talking a little bit about the types specifically. So we're going to start with type 9. And the structure to the way I'm going to talk about each of these types is, first I'm going to talk about the essence of the type. Then I'm going to do a demonstration of embodying the type. Then I'm going to talk about the childhood of the type and kind of what they look like as kids. And then kind of the structure development of how their pattern develops. I'll talk about strengths and challenges of the types, and then finally I'll talk about gateway and growth, like how the type can grow, kind of what their growth path looks like, and I'll end with some famous folks who embody the type to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like in the real world. Okay? So for type 9, the essence of type 9 is called harmony. And what that means is that the type's quality that is the most them, it's the most uniquely part of that type. It's kind of the quality that you might see or sense in a newborn baby. And for type 9s, that's called harmony. To embody the type, the way that type 9s are in their body is they're very relaxed, and they're definitely like really sinky into whatever seat they're in. You might kind of notice like a wandering quality to the way that they talk. If you ask them what they did this morning, they might be like, well, I got up and then I noticed that the bed skirt just wasn't straight, so I just kind of fiddled with it, and then I saw this pile of papers that I've had on my desk for 20 years, and I don't know why I've had this. So you see I'm kind of going off on a tangent. There's like a wandery kind of sing-songy quality to my voice. Something else you might notice about the embodiment of 9 is there seems to be, like, I'm looking at you right now, but there's almost like a kind of faded away quality to the way that I'm looking, right? I'm looking, but I'm not really engaged or super present, right? So if you can feel that difference, that's really that type 9 energy. Moving into the childhood of type 9, type 9s in childhood often describe that they felt unseen by their family. They felt like in order to be a good kid, they needed to kind of be under the radar and not have preferences, and really, they really pride themselves on going with the flow. And so in childhood, that often meant that they felt kind of unseen, or like maybe they felt forgotten about even. Um, but they just had the message that everybody else's needs were more important. So they often kind of took a back seat and didn't learn how to really speak up for themselves very well. So the structure of the pattern really develops as that essence of harmony, right? So if that's kind of their most strong quality, then the pattern is going to develop around that. And the way that that happens is that nines, because they have that sense of like what the family needs, or maybe that other siblings' needs are more important than theirs, because they have that sense, they're really walking into a room or a situation kind of reading the energy. And if the energy is too high or too up like this, a nine might kind of help us chill it out. But if we're too down and we're kind of having Eeyore time and we're sad, then a nine might help us cheer up. There's like this arbitrary neutralization of energy, of like nothing can be too intense. The way that nines structure happens is that they're avoiding intensity. So they're often avoiding conflict, avoiding overexcitement. It's not, a lot of times when we hear about nine, lots of teachers will talk about avoiding anger, but it's really less about avoiding anger and more about avoiding intensity. Even if I'm intensely excited, a nine might kind of avoid that and really be aware of potential for intensity around them. So, some strengths of nines is that they're very safe, loving, caring, often very generous. They're a lot of fun to be around. Lots of people describe nine as just like really lovely people to be around. I always know that I'm in the energy of a nine because, like, I could just kind of take a nap on their lap and it would be fine. Some challenges that nines may face is that they can be really stubborn, and their lack of voicing their opinion sometimes means that they could err on the passive aggressive side of things. So, because they're not saying, I want tacos, they might just go to dinner and be having spaghetti and be just like not really happy about the spaghetti because they really wanted tacos, but they're just there, not really saying anything, and they might be kind of sulky, but you can really feel a passive aggressiveness with nines because they're not saying that something's wrong or that they need something, but you can kind of sense that maybe something's wrong or they need something. So that passive aggressive, again, we're not causing conflict, right? Also, partners of nines can really complain a lot. Partners in particular, but other people in relationship with nines can complain about them not being very present and kind of emotionally unavailable. Again, because we're avoiding intensity. And what's really intense but emotions, right? Some famous nines that you might want to... Oh, I missed gateway. Okay, so the gateway for growth for nines is really about voicing preferences. It's about kind of getting clear about what they want and really staying in contact with themselves and not going with the flow, but really like being like, I really want tacos, right? Like really voicing those preferences and really speaking up for themselves when something is wrong, like being like, hey, that didn't feel good, or I prefer to be spoken to this way. Boundaries work is really good for nines. Some famous nines are that I'm going to share with you are Bill Clinton, and you can kind of hear it in the way that he talks, just like he's kind of soft-spoken and real diplomatic, right? Yeah. And the other famous nine that I wanted you guys to think about is Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh is a great, great nine. Yeah. No, my honey, right? Okay, so the next type I'm going to talk about is type 1. So type 1 is called the reformer or the perfectionist. Type 9 is called the peacemaker or the mediator. And type 1's essence is called, in the narrative tradition, it's called purity. But I prefer, and this is a Monica term, so like just know that you won't see this on the internet. Um, the term clarity for type 1. I like clarity so much better because the essence of 1 to me feels like cool, clean water. It's just a really beautiful experience of just cutting through the bullshit and just like knowing the right thing. And 1s are so great at that. To embody type 1, what we're looking at with type 1's body is type 1 is internalizing anger, and anger is a very intense emotion. They're kind of stuffing it down, which creates this very straight line. 1s often have excellent posture. And you'll notice as I'm talking right now, the talking style of 1 is often eloquent, and sometimes you can sense a pause or an interlude because they may be searching for the right or the correct word. 1s often also have excellent elocution, and there's a straightness and a kind of almost a looking down with the eyes at you. So if you can kind of feel my body and notice the difference between this and type 9, which we just talked about, right? Okay. In childhood, type 1s often report that they felt overly responsible for household duties, other siblings, for a parent. Type 1s are those kids that you never have to punish because they punish themselves way more than anybody else could ever punish them. Okay. 1s will often report also that they felt like they had a very critical parent, an overly harsh parent in some kind of way. Other children who interact with 1s might also call them bossy children because often type 1s have the best way how to play puppies and kittens figured out, and they're going to tell the other children how the very best way to play puppies and kittens is. So for type 1, the way that their pattern develops is that essence of clarity kind of gets projected, and this is how all of us develop our patterns, but our essence gets projected out into the world. So type 1s are really seeking perfection in themselves, in their partners and friends and families, and in the world in general. They make great leaders because of that. Actually, all the gut points, 8, 9, and 1, they all make really great leaders. But type 1s definitely have an amazing sense of the way that things should be. And so they're often really hyper aware of when things are wrong on the outside. And they may take note of that internally, or they may voice those things that are wrong. So type 1s, as you can imagine, some of their strengths, they have the highest integrity, great conviction. They are not afraid to stand alone. And they often they're very thoughtful about the way that they do things and the things that they say. Some challenges for 1s, however, is that other people can tend to perceive them as quite judgmental. And that's because how hard they are on themselves often gets projected outward because it's too painful for the type 1 to really carry all of that criticism themselves and by themselves. It's just too much. It's too heavy. So they can be kind of judgmental. 1s also really struggle. Certain subtypes of 1 can really struggle with seeing their own blind spots. type 1s do a lot of projecting because there's a lot of repressing. So there's a lot of repressing of things that 1s find childlike or instinctual, like eating, sexual desire. There's just a lot of pushing that down and pretending like it doesn't exist because it's seen as superfluous and maybe not morally good in some ways. So 1s can struggle with that repression. They can struggle with not seeing their own blind spots. So growth for 1s really often looks like asking what if questions, getting 1s to get curious about what if there was another way to play puppies and kittens. Anything that's silly or childlike is really good for 1s, like just do a cartwheel or, roll down the hill on your back or, anything that's silly and playful is really good growth stuff for 1s. Some famous 1s for you to consider are Martha Stewart and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, right? So we can see that conviction, the right way to do things, kind of the style of 1, right? Like Martha Stewart, everything she does is just like perfect. And she probably works really hard on it, right? Okay, last one in the gut triad, we're talking about type 8. So type 8 is the externalizer of anger, right? And the essence of type 8, which is type 8 is called the challenger, sometimes called the boss. And the essence of 8 is called cosmic power because they are these inherently powerful beings. You can really feel the power of a type 8 when they walk into a room. Like their type 8s are probably the easiest type to type because you can just feel how powerful and impactful they are in the world. They don't even have to say anything. Even if they're being silent, you can just feel how powerful they are. So the way that they hold their bodies is often big and powerful, and they take up a lot of space, and they might have a louder voice, or they might just be a little bit more animated, right? I'm doing an exaggerated version of this, so you can kind of tell, okay? So in childhood, little baby 8s often describe having very tough childhoods. They often describe that they felt like they had to protect someone or something in childhood. So maybe they had to protect a parent from the other parent. Maybe they had to protect a sibling from a parent or a sibling from neighborhood kids. Type 8s often describe, we see a pretty serious pattern with type 8s of childhood trauma. A lot of times type 8s have had a lot of trauma in their life, and they have developed this toughness as a way to deal with that trauma. So the way that their structure develops is that they kind of start to have a proclivity for understanding when someone or something is weak. And they're looking for weakness within themselves, but a lot within the outer world. And they're noticing where the power is in the room. And they do a lot of taking up for the underdog, but also a lot of advocating for themselves. And there's also a lot of seeking opportunities for power for 8s by taking on responsibilities, maybe sometimes too much. 8s are notorious for overworking. Challenging power in front of a group, kind of figuring out ways to remain in control of a situation, okay? So type 8s, some strengths of type 8s, they're great leaders. And they don't have a problem with like people not liking them, so they can really say and speak what's on their mind. And they often make great leaders, great protectors. They're great like trendsetters. Like they just don't have a problem. They have a sense of very like, I don't care what anybody thinks, and they actually really don't care, which is great. We need people like that. And usually they're also like kind of life of the party, really fun to be around. Every 8 I've ever met can totally just drink me under the table, because they just have this kind of zest for life, and they love good food, and they're often like hungry for the things in life that are lusty. It's wonderful. They love luxury. Eights are just lovely. Um, some challenges for eights, though, is that they can be controlling and domineering, and they often struggle to not be in control. And when they're not in control of a situation, they can really get anxious about it going wrong, and they're pretty sensitive to underdog type situations, and will often kind of buck up even if it's not necessary, and kind of step in for other people instead of giving other people the opportunity to take care of themselves. Okay. um Gateway and growth for eight is about reeling that in, stepping back, taking on less responsibility, letting other people kind of share in the control of a situation, um, and challenging the notion in themselves that if they're not in charge, things are going to go horribly wrong. So, some famous type eights for you to consider: Oprah. Oprah's a type eight. A lot of us probably really hate this one, but Donald Trump is also a type eight. He's a really good example of what an unhealthy eight looks like. And one of my personal favorite type eights is Lizzo, the singer. And you can really see she's such a great one because if you've ever watched an interview with her, like, she's so positive, and you can tell that positivity is really important to her. Um, and she just doesn't mind to set trends, like she plays the flute, for crying out loud, It's like really, I don't know, she's just really great. I often think about her when I think about type eights. And Oprah too, like you can really sense the kind of challenger in her. And if you ever watched her interview, like she's had some kind of controversial shows where she really calls people out. And if you watch that on TV, like you can see her eight energy kind of going at people. Okay, that's the gut triad. Thanks for listening. Be sure to pay attention to, what feels like you, maybe someone you know. Can you think of other celebrities or people you know that might embody these types? And stay tuned for more of these Enneagram videos. Hey y'all, so today I'm going to talk to you about the gut triad, which is 8, 9, and 1. And those are the ones in green. And little housekeeping note, I'm working off an outline here on the other side of my screen. So if you see my eyes bing bonging around, that's why. But we're going to start off talking about the gut triad,